Billionaire CEO. Hears black hotel construction worker speak 9 languages. What he did next shocked everyone in the room. "I'm sorry, but you can't be here during our executive meeting," said manager Carolyn Hayes, blocking the entrance to the Starlight Hotel's grand hall with her impeccable suit and fake smile. Maintenance must wait outside. James Carter, 28, held his toolbox and looked calmly at the woman who had just treated him like an intruder. He adjusted his worn cap, hiding the flicker of frustration in his eyes. He was there to fix the air conditioning system that had broken down right in the middle of the most important international investment conference of the month, an event that brought together billionaires from 7 different countries. "Ma'am, I was called by the reception. The air conditioning has completely stopped and the temperature has risen above 28 degrees, James began respectfully, but was interrupted by an executive in a gray suit who approached him angrily, wiping sweat from his forehead. "What the hell is going on here? We have Japanese, German, and Arab investors waiting for 10 minutes in an oven. And this employee is disrupting our meeting," growled the man, not even bothering to look directly at James. "Carolyn, fix this now." Carolyn Hayes sighed dramatically, as if dealing with a stubborn child. "Look, I don't know how you got past security, but these are very important people discussing $1,000 deals. You don't belong here." She leaned in, her voice dripping with condescension. "People like you should know your place." It was at that moment that Edward Marshall, billionaire CEO of Marshall Global Investments, heard something that made him stop mid-sentence about international acquisitions. James had discreetly turned to a group of confused Asian investors near the window who were gesturing nervously among themselves and began speaking in fluent Japanese. "I'm sorry, the problems at this hotel will be resolved shortly," James said with perfect Japanese pronunciation, explaining kindly that the technical problem would be resolved in minutes and apologizing for the inconvenience. The hall fell silent. Even the waiters stopped serving water. Marshall frowned deeply as he watched James address the German executives in perfect German. "I apologize for this inconvenience. The problem will be corrected in a few minutes." He then reassured the French representatives and finally explained the situation to the Arab investors in fluent Arabic. Each word was delivered with such poise that the investors nodded in approval, their earlier frustration melting away. All this while, Carolyn Hayes and her fellow executives stared at him with a mixture of shock, indignation, and something dangerously close to panic. "That's impossible," someone behind Marshall muttered. "A janitor simply couldn't." "He can't know those languages," another executive added, his voice heavy with disbelief and something darker. James finished his explanations, and the international investors, who moments earlier had seemed ready to walk out of the meeting, now watched him with genuine respect and gratitude. One of the Japanese even bowed politely, clearly impressed not only by the fluency, but by the appropriate cultural courtesy. Carolyn felt the blood rush to her face. "Edward, this is absurd. How can a maintenance man—" "Carolyn," Marshall interrupted her in a tone that made the entire room turn toward him. "Shut up now." His eyes narrowed, sensing something extraordinary unfolding before him. James picked up his toolbox and walked with dignity toward the air conditioning control panel, his movements precise and professional. But his eyes revealed something Marshall recognized immediately. The same cold, calculating determination he himself possessed when he was about to execute a devastating business move. As he worked, a faint smirk played on his lips, as if he knew the storm he had just unleashed. As James worked on the panel, removing the cover with expert movements, Marshall approached slowly. "How many languages do you speak exactly?" James looked him straight in the eye for the first time without lowering his gaze or showing any intimidation. 9 fluently, sir. Japanese, German, French, Arabic, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, Mandarin, and English. 3 others conversational, Russian, Korean, and Hindi. "And how long have you worked here?" 6 months, sir. General maintenance, plumbing, electrical, air conditioning, carpentry, whatever the hotel needs, James replied, his calm voice masking something much deeper and more powerful. Carolyn could no longer contain her indignation. "Edward, we need to have a serious talk about the hiring standards at this hotel. It is completely unacceptable for maintenance staff to interfere in executive meetings, no matter how many languages they claim to speak. There is a hierarchy here that must be respected. She shot a venomous glance at James, her voice trembling with barely concealed rage. The temperature in the room was gradually dropping as James worked, but the tension in the air was rising exponentially. Carolyn Marshall's voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. "You just made the biggest mistake of your career and perhaps of your life." James smiled discreetly as he closed the air conditioning panel, the system returning to normal with a soft hum. But anyone watching him closely would have noticed that this was not a smile of relief or satisfaction at a job well done. It was the dangerous smile of someone who had held powerful cards for too long and had finally found the perfect moment to play them. He glanced at Carolyn, his eyes glinting with a quiet defiance that sent a shiver down her spine. If you're enjoying this story of prejudice and surprising discoveries, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple moment of discrimination would turn into the most unexpected twist that luxury hotel had ever witnessed. 2 hours after the incident in the lounge, Carolyn Hayes called an emergency meeting with the hotel's general manager, Michael Brooks, and 2 supervisors. Her voice was heavy with barely contained indignation. "This is unacceptable, Michael. A maintenance employee interfered in an executive meeting with the country's biggest investors? No matter how many languages he claims to speak, there is a hierarchy here that must be respected." Michael, a 45-year-old man who knew every employee by name, frowned. "Carolyn, from what I've been told, James just helped solve a technical problem and even managed to calm down the international investors." "Where exactly is the problem?" she interrupted sharply. "Is that now Edward Marshall is asking questions about our hidden talents and questioning our human resources policies? This young man may have caused institutional embarrassment." She slammed her hand on the table, her face flushed with a mix of fear and fury. Meanwhile, 3 floors below, James was organizing his tools in the maintenance closet when his phone vibrated. It was a message from Leroy Johnson, his only real friend at the hotel, a 50-year-old African-American veteran who worked as the head of night security. "Man, they're talking about you upstairs. Carolyn is furious. Want to meet after work? I need to tell you a few things." James smiled as he read the message. Leroy didn't know it, but that conversation would be more important than he could have imagined. That afternoon, Marshall did something unusual. He went down to the Human Resources Department himself. "I want to see the complete file on employee James Carter," he told the coordinator, a nervous woman named Susan. "Mr. Marshall, it's highly irregular for a CEO to request individual files on operational employees," she began, but was silenced by a look that was worth billions. "Susan, bring me the file now." 10 minutes later, Marshall was engrossed in reading James Carter, 28, United States-born citizen. Education: incomplete degree in civil engineering, University of California. Reason for interruption: family financial issues. Previous experience: freelance translator, language instructor, industrial maintenance technician. But what caught her attention most was a handwritten note at the bottom: "Highly qualified candidate for the position. Will accept well below market salary due to urgent financial needs." "Interesting," Marshall muttered. "Very interesting." He tapped his pen on the desk, his mind racing with possibilities. Meanwhile, Carolyn wasn't sitting around. She made 3 strategic phone calls that afternoon, 2 to contacts on the hotel's board of directors, and 1 to a private investigator she used for special background checks. "I want to know everything about this James Carter. Criminal history, debts, immigration issues, anything we can use, and I want it by tomorrow." Her voice was cold, calculated, as if she were plotting a corporate takeover. At 11 p.m., James met Leroy in the hotel parking lot. Leroy lit a cigarette and got straight to the point. "Brother, this Carolyn is out to get you. I heard her talking to the management. She wants your head, and what's worse, she's got people upstairs who can back her up." James nodded calmly. "I figured as much. People like her don't like it when the natural order of things is questioned. Man, you need to protect yourself. I know you're not just a maintenance guy. In 6 months working together, I've seen you solve problems that engineers couldn't. I've heard you talking on the phone in languages I didn't even know existed. Leroy stopped and stared at him. "Who are you really?" James took a deep breath. It was time to trust someone. "Leroy, I was a civil engineer in California. I worked for a multinational company, talking to clients from all over the world. When my mother got sick, I dropped everything to care for her. Complicated paperwork, money ran out, she died before I could save her. I ended up staying." "And why don't you go back to your field?" James smiled. But there was something different about that smile. A cold determination that Leroy had never seen before. Because sometimes you have to be down to see who's really up. "And now that I've seen, I have some plans." Leroy threw his cigarette away. "What kind of plans?" "The kind that will make Carolyn Hayes regret underestimating the maintenance man." He clenched his fist, his resolve hardening like steel. That night, James didn't sleep. In his small apartment, he opened a laptop that no one at the hotel knew he owned and began accessing websites that revealed a completely hidden side of his life. LinkedIn in 3 different languages, a portfolio of international projects, a network of contacts that spanned 5 continents. And then he did something that would change everything. He sent an email to a phone number he had saved 6 months ago, waiting for the right moment. "Robert, this is James Carter. Remember me? Engineer on the bridge construction in San Francisco. I need a favor. It's time to show some people that underestimating talent can be the most expensive mistake of their lives." He hit send, his heart pounding with the weight of what was to come. While waiting for a reply, James looked out the window of his apartment, watching the city lights. For 6 months he had been invisible, underestimated, treated like just another disposable employee. But invisibility can be a powerful weapon when used intelligently, and James Carter was about to prove that some people confuse humility with weakness at their own peril. The next morning, Carolyn Hayes arrived at the hotel with a victorious smile. Her private investigator had found exactly what she wanted. James Carter had a history of irregular documentation in the United States. Technically, he had worked without authorization during his first months in the country. "Michael, I need to talk to you urgently," she said, interrupting the general manager in his office. "I've discovered something serious about our problem employee." She spread the documents across the table like cards in a winning hand. James Carter worked illegally when he first arrived in the United States. This is a serious violation of hotel policy and could cause us huge legal problems. Michael examined the papers, frowning. "Carolyn, that was years ago. He regularized his status, and it doesn't matter," she cut him off. "We need to fire him today, before Edward Marshall finds out we have an employee with an irregular history working here." Her eyes gleamed with malicious triumph. But what Carolyn didn't know was that 3 floors above, Edward Marshall was in a video conference that would change everything. "Robert Johnson, my old friend," Marshall said, greeting the man on the screen. "Thank you for taking my call so early." Robert Johnson, CEO of the largest construction company in North America, smiled from the other side of the screen. "Edward, I was surprised to receive your message last night. You mentioned something about a James Carter." "That's right. Do you know him?" Robert's face lit up. "James Carter, the brilliant engineer who designed the Golden Gate Bridge? Retrofit? Of course I know him. He's one of the most competent professionals I've ever worked with." "Why do you ask?" Marshall felt something cold run down his spine. The Golden Gate Bridge, retrofit, one of the most complex engineering projects of the last 10 years. James led the entire international structural design team. He dealt with German, Japanese, and Arab teams. The man is a genius. Please tell me you haven't lost him to a competitor." "Robert," Marshall said slowly, "where exactly is James Carter working now?" "Well, after his mother fell ill, he sacrificed his career to care for her in the United States. We lost touch, but we always hoped he would return." "Why did you hire him?" Marshall hung up the phone, his mind spinning. James Carter wasn't just a skilled engineer. He was an international engineering legend, and he was working as a maintenance technician at his hotel. Meanwhile, Carolyn descended to the hotel basement with a security guard to carry out the dismissal. She found James organizing tools in the storage room as usual. "James Carter," she said, her voice laden with false authority. By management decision, your services are no longer required. You have until the end of the day to collect your belongings. James stared at her calmly. May I ask why? Carolyn smiled, cruelly. We have discovered irregularities in your work documentation. The hotel cannot keep employees with a questionable background. She crossed her arms, savoring her perceived victory. I see, James said, his voice strangely calm. And Mr. Marshall approved this decision. Mr. Marshall doesn't need to concern himself with operational personnel issues, Carolyn replied, relishing every word. Now, please hand over your badge and keys. It was at that moment that Carolyn's cell phone rang. It was a call from Michael Brooks. Carolyn, where are you? Edward Marshall wants to see you and James Carter in his executive suite. Now Carolyn's blood ran cold. Michael, I can explain. Carolyn, do you have any idea who James Carter is? 20 minutes later, Carolyn, James, and Michael were in Marshall's executive suite. The atmosphere was tense, like a steel cable about to snap. Carolyn, Marshall began, his voice deadly calm, could you explain to me why you're firing the chief engineer who designed one of the most complex bridges in the world? Carolyn paled. I didn't know. You didn't know? Marshall opened his laptop and turned the screen toward her. James Carter, civil engineer specializing in international structures, led projects in 12 countries, speaks 9 languages because he worked directly with multinational teams on $1,000 projects. James remained silent, watching Carolyn crumble. But the most interesting thing, Marshall continued, is what I found out about you, Carolyn. He opened a folder on his computer. Screenshots of your messages in the private managers group, where you refer to Latino employees as immigration problems and Black employees as diversity quotas. Carolyn tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. WhatsApp messages where you instructed other managers to keep these types in their place. And my favorite, your message to the board of directors asking to clean the hotel of undesirable elements. Where did you get this? Carolyn stammered. Her hands trembled, her carefully constructed facade shattering. James finally spoke. Leroy Johnson, head of security, excellent with technology, and it turns out that some employees saved your messages before you tried to delete them. Marshall smiled coldly. Carolyn Hayes, you're fired for cause. And since your actions constitute racial discrimination and harassment, we will be reporting this to the Civil Rights Department. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. You thought you could bury talent like his. You were wrong. Carolyn tried one last desperate gambit. You can't do this. I have rights. I have contacts. You have the right to leave this hotel immediately, Marshall said. Security is on its way. As Carolyn was escorted out, James remained in the room. James Marshall said, I have a proposal. How about taking over supervision of all our international expansion projects, starting with a salary of $150,000, 0 cents a year? James smiled. Not the restrained smile of before, but a genuine smile of someone who had finally seen justice done. Mr. Marshall, it would be an honor. Downstairs in the lobby that had been the scene of her humiliation one day earlier, Carolyn Hayes carried a box containing her belongings, while employees whispered and stared at her. The woman who had spent years despising people for their origins was now being seen for exactly what she had always been, small, cruel, and completely expendable. But the story was not over yet. What Carolyn did not know was that her dismissal would be only the beginning of a much more devastating fall, and that James Carter had even more surprises in store regarding his true influence in the international corporate world. 3 months later, James Carter was in his office on the 15th floor of the Starlight Hotel, reviewing expansion contracts for 3 new hotels in Europe. His mahogany desk was covered with documents in 6 different languages, and his assistant had just confirmed a video conference with investors in Dubai for 2 p.m. The transformation had been extraordinary, but not just for James. The entire hotel breathed differently. Leroy Johnson had been promoted to head of corporate security after James discovered that he had digital security certifications that no one had bothered to check. Susan from the former HR team now led the new Hidden Talents program, identifying employees with underutilized skills throughout the hotel chain. The program had already uncovered a receptionist who spoke 4 languages, a waiter with an MBA who paid his bills by working night shifts, and a housekeeper who was a certified accountant in Mexico. The meeting with the Japanese was a complete success, reported Michael Brooks, entering James's office. They were impressed not only with your language skills, but with your strategic vision for the Asian market. James smiled, remembering how just 3 months earlier Carolyn had tried to stop him from entering the same room where he was now closing $1,000 deals. "And Carolyn?" James asked, even though he already knew the answer. Michael grimaced. The discriminatory messages were leaked to the local press. No reputable hotel wants to hire her. I hear she's working as a supervisor at a motel on the highway. What Michael didn't mention, but James knew from Leroy, was that Carolyn had lost much more than her job. Her husband, a respected lawyer, had filed for divorce when the prejudiced messages became public. Her 2 daughters, both college students, had cut off contact with her out of shame. She had gone from respected executive to social pariah in a matter of weeks. "Karma is an interesting thing," James murmured, without malice in his voice. Just the realization of someone who had seen the natural justice of the universe in action. That afternoon, James received a call that made him smile genuinely. It was Robert Johnson, his former boss, in California. "James, I need you back. I'm putting together the largest infrastructure project in North America, and I want you leading the international team." "Robert, I'm very happy here. Marshall has given me complete autonomy to expand the business internationally. Then how about a partnership? Your new hotel company could be our official lodging partner on all projects. I heard about your showdown with that manager. You've got the industry buzzing." James looked out his office window, watching the city that 6 months earlier had welcomed him as a desperate worker looking for work in any field. Now, he was about to close international partnerships that would move thousands of dollars. "Let's talk, Robert. I have some ideas." That evening, the Starlight Hotel hosted a special ceremony. James had insisted that he didn't want anything pompous, but Marshall had completely ignored his objections. In the same hall where Carolyn had tried to humiliate him, James now received a plaque recognizing him as Executive of the Year from the International Hotel Association. "When I was a 2-year-old and in California," James said into the microphone, looking out at the audience of executives, investors, and hotel employees, "my grandmother always said, 'Grandson, never judge a person by the clothes they wear or the job they do. Judge them by the size of their heart and the strength of their dreams.'" The audience was completely silent. "I spent 6 months cleaning these same hallways, fixing air conditioners, unclogging sinks, and you know what? It was the best MBA course I could have taken. I learned that true leadership doesn't come from a title. It comes from how you treat people when no one is looking." The applause was deafening, but James wasn't finished. "I want to dedicate this award to all the employees who are ignored, underestimated, treated as invisible. You are not invisible. You are the heart of any organization." And to the executives here today, before you judge someone by the uniform they wear, ask yourself, do you really know who stands before you? Leroy Johnson, now wearing an impeccable suit instead of his security uniform, applauded from the front row alongside Susan and all the employees who had been promoted through the Hidden Talent program. 3 tables back, a journalist from Fortune Business magazine was frantically taking notes. James's story would become the cover story of the next issue titled, "The Invisible Engineer: How Corporate Bias Almost Cost a Hotel Company Thousands." But James's real victory wasn't in the awards or financial success. It was in the email he received the following week from a young Latina woman who worked as a cleaning lady in a corporate office in New York. "Mr. Carter, I read your story in the magazine. Today, for the first time in 2 years, I had the courage to talk to my boss about my accounting degree. Thank you for showing me that being underestimated doesn't mean you're less capable." Carolyn Hayes had tried to destroy James Carter because she couldn't accept that greatness has no color, social class, or uniform. In the end, she only destroyed herself. While James built an empire based on the recognition of human value, the best revenge is not to destroy those who hurt you, is to build something so extraordinary that they realize exactly what they lost when they chose to underestimate you. And as James walked off the stage, he caught a glimpse of a news alert on his phone. Carolyn had just been named in a class action lawsuit by former employees, her downfall now a cautionary tale echoing across the industry. James's triumph showed talent shines through prejudice, inspiring countless others. But could Carolyn redeem herself, or was her fate sealed? Share your thoughts. Have you overcome being underestimated?